Hello and welcome to this crash course on JSON T, the templating language of Squarespace templates. If you look at all the tutorials I've done before this one, I've focused heavily on Shopify and Shopify Liquid. But while I think for e-commerce Shopify is the best when it comes to developing a proprietary platform, I do believe that if you're building more of a content-based website without the e-commerce, there are much better choices. One of those choices is Squarespace, which I'm sure many of you have heard of before, but have probably never thought to edit or create your own template. I got curious about Squarespace because it's a similar system to Shopify. It's just that the theme or the front-end template code is called a template in Squarespace. And so with Squarespace, what you're able to do is maintain that same great user experience on the back end with a Squarespace admin, but then customize the front end through the use of Squarespace developer mode, which gives you full access to the template code. So in this video, what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you the JSON T language, which is actually really simple once you understand how it works. As mentioned, JSON Template, otherwise known as JSON T for short, is the template language of Squarespace templates, and it's designed to be paired with a JSON dataset. You guys might not be aware of this, but if you head to any Squarespace site, you can simply add $format equals JSON pretty to the end of any address, and the page will be instantly transformed into a JSON dataset. Essentially, you've got a JSON API sitting on every Squarespace site, and what JSON T does is provide a simple way of grabbing and displaying data from this JSON data layer inside various sections of your Squarespace website. So what we're going to do in this video is learn some of the syntax of JSON T, and then if you'd like to take your learning further, I'll share with you a resource to fully understand the template structure and some of the other parts of Squarespace template development. Without further ado, let's head onto the computer and start to write some JSON T. In today's video, in order to demonstrate JSON T, I'm going to need three things. I'm going to need a Squarespace template, a Squarespace website, and Squarespace's dev server. For the template, I'm going to use base template, which you can find at base-template.squarespace.com. This address will allow you to create a website with this template. But instead of having to create the website, what I've done is I've already created the website for you and downloaded the code, so you can just access it by going to my GitHub page at github.com/ChristopherDodd and looking at the repository Skillshare. Inside that repository, you can scroll down and find squarespace-base-template.zip. If you download that and unzip that, that can be your template for this tutorial. The second thing you're going to need is a Squarespace website. For this tutorial, I'm going to use my own live website that's built on Squarespace, chrisdoddmedia.com, but you can actually use any Squarespace website you like. It doesn't have to be your own. It can be the same website as me. It can be another Squarespace website. It just needs to be a Squarespace website. And of course, the third thing you're going to need is the dev server. So if you go to developers.squarespace.com and click Get Started, you can scroll down to this section on how to develop locally with Squarespace Server. You'll just need to install Squarespace Server by running this command npm install -g at squarespace-server. But of course, you will need to have npm installed first before you can run that command. So if you don't already have npm installed, you can click on this link right here to go to the Node.js website, download and install Node.js and npm. So how it all works is that we're going to use this Squarespace dev server to take the data from an existing Squarespace site and load it into a template locally. And that will allow us to make local changes to the template without having to upload to a Squarespace site. And so we can see exactly how JSON T is working on our own computer without having to view or make changes to a live Squarespace website. So first things first, I'm going to go to my favorite code editing software, which is VS Code at the moment. And I'm going to open up that base template. Right here on my desktop, Squarespace-base template. So there you have it. We have our template right here. And what I'm going to do is run this template using Squarespace Live Server, using the data from my Squarespace website. And the way I do that is by running the command Squarespace-server, grabbing the URL of my website, or whatever website you want to use, and then hitting enter. As a side note here, if the website you're trying to run through Squarespace Live Server is a development site in the sense that it's a trial site that's not yet published, you will have to likely put in --auth at the end of this command and be asked for your username and password. As Chris Dodd Media is a live website on the internet, we don't actually have to provide credentials in order to run it on our Squarespace Live Server. As you see down here, it says listening on port 9000. So I'm going to open up a browser tab with localhost 9000 in there, and it should take a little bit of time to get running. Squarespace server is a bit slow on the first load. After a while, the website is finished loading, and as you can see, it's got the same content as my home page here, but you can see the font is different. There's no navigation, and that is because the template is completely different. So it's pretty cool. Within Squarespace Dev Server, we can run whatever website we want as long as it's a Squarespace server through our own Squarespace template. And that's because at the core of every Squarespace website is just a bunch of data represented as JSON. I want to prove this to you right now. If we head to chrisdoddmedia.com, we can type $format equals JSON pretty to the end of any page, and suddenly we will see a whole bunch of JSON data. Within this, we can see the site title, we can see details for the actual page, website settings, we can see all the information available to us on the front end. And this is not just my website, this is any Squarespace website. There's another Squarespace website I found called slowtravel.com, or slowtravelmagazine.com rather. And here we can do the same thing. We can put format equals JSON pretty on the end, and then we can see that without the template, the website is just a whole bunch of JSON code. So basically all that a Squarespace template does is take this JSON data layer and represent it as a fully functioning website by combining this data with HTML, CSS, and JavaScript through the use of JSON T. So let's actually get stuck in and write some JSON T now. So if I close this and I head to localhost 9000, we can do the same thing. We can go format equals JSON pretty, and we can see the same data that we see here. But the difference is, if we take away the format JSON pretty, it's now running on whatever template we're running the server through. So what I'm going to do is go into my Squarespace-based template code, head to the site.region file, which is the main layout file of your whole Squarespace template. And what I'm going to do is something drastic, which is to remove all of the body code. 100% of the body code we'll get rid of, and I'm going to hit save on that. All right, come back over to here, and now we've got a completely blank website. Now the reason why I'm doing this is so I can demonstrate to you JSON T. And so I'm just clearing out everything in the body so that we can write some JSON T clearly here. What I'm going to do is get rid of the body ID and classes as well, and let's write some JSON T. The first thing I'm going to do is console log the JSON context into my JavaScript console here in my browser. So on a Mac using Chrome, I can press Option Command I, which I believe is accessed through View Developer Tools. But here you can see I've got a JavaScript console. What I can do is I can put the data from this file into our console, and that way we can see our page and our data alongside each other. So that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to write script, opening and closing tag, and inside just a console log. And inside this console log, I'm going to write our first bit of JSON T, which is going to take this @ symbol, which represents the current scope, the current JSON context, and then I'm going to put JSON after it. This pipe and the keyword after it represents something called a JSON T formatter, which we'll get to in just a sec. But for now, in order to see the data, I'm going to save that and then run the page. Now you can see we've got an object showing up over here, and if we click into it, we get all the same information as over here. So basically all that's involved with JSON T is taking this data right here, navigating through it, and outputting what we want into our template. So let's do that right now. Let's write some JSON T. I'm going to split screen this right now by putting this at the top and putting our code at the bottom. So now we've got the three parts. We've got our JSON data layer over here. We've got our code, and we've got the output right here. So a very basic example of pulling data off this JSON context. Let's look for a basic key value pair. One we can see right here, calendar view. So the key is calendar view and the value is false. All we have to do in JSON T in order to access that value is write the key inside these curly brackets. So I'm going to type calendar view, hit save, refresh our page, and now you can see the value false comes up. So we put in the key, we got the value. Very basic. Now, of course, most of the time you're going to be navigating through one or more objects that are nested inside of each other. So for instance, if we go into this website object right here, we have all of the overall website data in this object. So say for instance, we wanted to bring in the site title. What we do is we use dot notation to navigate inside of other objects. So at the top, we've got website. So we can go website dot and then find the site title like that. And then when we save on that, refresh over here, you'll see that the site title comes up. So very basic. All we need to do when we navigate into objects is put a dot after the object name, and then we can go deeper inside. So if there was another object inside here that we wanted to access, we could do website dot and then that object name dot and then the attribute inside that. Another example right here is Squarespace.main content, which is a very, very common tag in JSON T, and you'll probably see it in every template because it's what brings in the Squarespace page content onto the template. Okay, so here you can see the Squarespace object. If I go inside, I can see an attribute for main content. So let's clean this up a bit by putting in some HTML code. I'm going to put a H1 around the website title, and then I'm going to output the Squarespace main content. So again, navigating into the Squarespace object and grabbing the main content attribute. I'll hit save on that, refresh the page over here, and as you can see, we've got our title inside a H1, and then we've got the page content, which is what matches up with our page content here. Most of the time, the page content inside that Squarespace.main content attribute is what you've set up in your CMS, so what you've set up in the Squarespace page builder. But if you're viewing a collection that you've coded yourself or a static page that you've coded yourself, it will actually show that instead. But we won't get into that stuff in this video. Instead, what I want to do is move on to directives, which is the most common bit of syntax you'll see in Squarespace apart from just pure value substitution. So, for instance, if I wanted to pull more data off this website object, maybe I want to pull off the site tagline. So I'm going to use website again, navigate inside the website object, and find the site tagline. There's the key right there. So if I put dot followed by the key name, save on that, refresh the page in our browser, you can see the site tagline comes across, right? So there are two issues with writing code this way. Number one, if the site tagline is empty, we'll still get these EM tags. The site title, I think, is compulsory, so we can assume that there's always going to be a site title, but the site tagline could be empty, in which case, if it is, we'll still get these EM tags. That's one issue with this code. The other issue is that we're repeating ourselves. We're putting website dot after. Okay, so if I was to, maybe it's not a big deal right now while we're using it twice, but if I was to, go inside and maybe put the site description in here as well. So we've got website dot site description, closing p tag. If I put that one in there as well, you can see we're repeating ourselves quite a bit with website dot. So the directive we should use to solve both of these problems is the section directive. So a directive you can figure out by looking at the syntax, and the syntax is going to be a curly bracket starting with a dot followed by a keyword. So the section directive is dot section. Now, what the section directive allows us to do is both zoom into a part of our JSON context, and also it allows us to check for the existence of that part of the JSON context. So you'll see what I mean in just a second. Let's first of all set up the end tag. I always like to do that so we don't forget, because we need to set up a block here. All right. Now what we're going to do is zoom into the website object right here, and we can now grab all of this, put it inside this code block, fixing up the nesting, and instead of website dot, we're already zoomed into website, so now we can clear out website dot on all these, and it'll know to grab the site title from the website object, the site tagline from the website object, and the site description from the website object. So let's save this, refresh the page, and you'll see it still works. Now, of course, site description is blank. If I go in and inspect, you'll see that we've still got a paragraph opening and closing tag, even though there is no site description. So what we can do using the section directive is check for the existence of the site description, and if there is none, it won't show the p tags. The way we do that is by going in here, writing a section tag, and we can not only target a object, we can target the site description itself, and then put in an end here. And now this code will only run if the site description exists. So if I hit save on that, refresh over here, you'll now see in our HTML, there is no p tags whatsoever. All right, so section directives allow us to zoom into parts of the JSON context and also check for the existence of objects and attributes. All right, so we've now learned how to access objects, navigate inside them, and bring out certain attributes on those objects. We've done this with a Boolean value, we've done this with strings, and with numbers, it works quite the same way. But what about arrays? If I head back into the console over here and look at our JSON context, let's go into here. Let's look at the website object again, scroll down and look for an array. Here you can see under social accounts, the value is an array. And so we've got two objects in here, which represents our social accounts that are connected. Okay, so this is not the most practical example, but we'll get to a more practical example in just a sec. I want to jump straight in and show you the next directive, which is the second most common one you're likely to use in template development, which is repeated section. So we've done section up here. Let's create a new directive, and it looks a lot like the section directive, except we put repeated in front. I'm going to close it before we write any more code. And after section here, we're going to put in the name of the array, which is social accounts. Remember, we're outside the context of website here, so I'm going to take this and make sure it's in this context of website. Okay, now inside the repeated section, what we can do is access data on every single item in this array. Now inside this array are objects that have a slightly different makeup, but both of them have a service name. So let's actually, I'm going to open up an unordered list and close it there. And then inside each iteration of the loop, I'm going to output a list item, and inside the list item, we're going to put in the service name. Okay, so this should output all the service name attributes of all the items in this social accounts array. If I refresh the page over here, you can see we have that list. Now, as I mentioned, it's not the most practical example, but you can actually see that this is working. If we go into website, we go into social accounts, you can see the service name for the first one is Facebook. The service name for the second one is Instagram Unorth. Not the most user-friendly names, but again, not the best example. What is a better example is actually looping through items in a collection, okay? We're actually on the home page at the moment, so we're not inside a collection. So what I'm gonna do, I'm gonna get rid of that code to begin with, and I'm gonna use a special tag in Squarespace that allows us to bring in data from other parts of our website. This is not strictly speaking JSON T code, but we need it in this case in order to bring in the data from another part of our website, all right? So this tag right here with the attributes of collection and limit, I need to close the Squarespace query tag as well. What this allows us to do is grab the data from any collection on our Squarespace website and make that the context within this code block. So I'm going to grab the data from my events collection on my website, hit save on that. I'll show you over here on my live website, I've got a page for events, and it's just a bunch of Vimeo embeds with all the events that I'd shot. Okay, so going to put that up to split screen again, head back over to our local version. And in order to see what's inside that JSON context, I'm going to take this console log again and put it inside here. This is the workflow. Every time I create a new JSON context, I want to see what's inside that so I can navigate it and then write the appropriate JSON T. So I'm going to refresh the page now. And as you can see, we've got a second object that's showing up. And by the looks of it, it's quite different to the first one. So this one was on our site.region file, sitting above all of our section directives and above this Squarespace query tag. But with this Squarespace query tag, what we've done is created a new context, and so we can see that context by outputting that @ object there. All right, so if I look inside here, we've got the information for the collection, but we've also got an array of items. And this is what we use in typically our list files to bring out the items in, say for instance, a blog, a gallery, or a list of events, a list of projects, the list goes on. But in this case, we're bringing through a list inside a gallery of Vimeo embeds. If I look inside this items array, look at one of the objects, you can see that we've got a title of the event, we've got the source URL of the Vimeo embed, and we've got the thumbnail URL right here. So what I'm going to do, armed with this information, is write a repeated section. So let's navigate through this JSON object. I'm going to type in the code repeated section and then close that. And then after this section word, we're going to put in the name of the array that we want to cycle through. So that's going to be items. And what this is going to do is scope into each individual item and run this code for every item in this array. So again, I'm going to create an unordered list, and then inside each iteration of the loop, put in a list element, and then I'm going to just output the title, I think, for each of them. Where is the title? Up here, title. All right, just need to put title there. I'm going to save that, refresh the page over here, and now you can see the title of each item in this array, which is the list of the events that I've shot and shared on my Squarespace website. We can also take other attributes, like for instance, the asset URL, which is the image that gets displayed. So basically like the thumbnail. So if I wanted to, I could, instead of having title here, I could open up an image tag, and inside the src attribute, put in this asset URL, hit save on that, refresh the page over here, and now we should start to see all the images from this particular collection show up. Unfortunately, some of them aren't optimized for the web, but as you can see here, all of these images are coming through, and they're the same images that are being used on the live website right here. So that right there, guys, is basically the majority of what you're going to be doing in JSON T when you code Squarespace templates. That is basically the fundamentals right there. But there are some other parts of JSON T to note. And for that, we're going to go into the documentation. So I'm going to maximize both of these windows. And let's head over to the documentation. Head into template docs if you're not already there. And then scrolling down, you can see a whole bunch of menu items for JSON T. I'm going to click on the first one, and let's have a look at what it says here. So if we head through the documentation, we can see a recap of some of the things we learnt in today's video, like this value substitution thing. If we put in the key, we're going to get the value in our document. We can navigate through objects that are nested inside each other by using these dots. And then we've got the dot section and dot repeated section directives as well. So this is the main parts of JSON T, which we've gone through today. inside this menu item for JSON T directives, it talks more about the section and repeated section directives. We can also put in an or clause. So for instance, in our code over here, if site description does not exist, what we could do is put in an or. So if it doesn't exist, we can just say site description does not exist. You probably wouldn't want to do that on an actual website, but if we go back to here and refresh the page, you can see site description does not exist. So in our example, if site description is there, we're going to output it with p tags, and if it doesn't exist, we're going to just output site description does not exist, okay? So you got other things like that in here. You've also got alternates with, which allows us to put things in between iterations of a loop. We've got a var directive here, which allows us to define our own variables. I am yet to find a good use for that. And down here we have the comment directive. Okay, so a little bit more information here on the Squarespace documentation if you want to have a look. A few more other things I need to point out before we wrap up here are predicates that are special directives that check for certain things. So for instance, one of the ones I use in my Skillshare class, which I'll mention later, is the folder predicate. So while we're looping through items in a navigation array, we can see if the navigation item is a folder by using this predicate. And basically, if it is a folder, then the code in here will run. Okay, but these are special directives that you need to look up here in the documentation. And if you see them out in the wild, come back to this page and look them up. It's clear to see that they are predicates by the syntax here, which has this question mark, okay? Over here in JSON T formatters, you can see that putting a pipe and a keyword after a variable or object changes the output and formats it in a certain way. So we've seen throughout this class the @ with the pipe JSON that allows us to take the JSON context and actually output it in a human readable format. Down here, if we had a date, we could format it using this date time formatter and all sorts of other ones down here. Again, if you need to reference that, it's all in the documentation. Finally, JSON T helpers that are a subset of JSON T formatters. They allow us to pull extra information off an object, and you can spot them by the @ pipe and then a keyword. So if you can't find what you're looking for in formatters, come through and look here in helpers. There's also a final menu item here for system variables. Remember, we looked at Squarespace.main content. All of this works on value substitution, which we've already seen in this video. Okay, so again, most of the language, most of the work you're going to do, and most of the code that you will write when writing Squarespace templates is just these two directives and then value substitution. Using the section tag, using the repeated section, and then also knowing what's going on with your JSON context in multiple areas of your template. For instance, if you're in a block file and you output the JSON context like this, you'll get a different result. If I go inside this loop and put in that console log, you'll get yet another result. So it's important to note that you can't just rely on this outer console log. Every time you change the JSON context, you're going to need to look inside that scope, figure out what the object that is coming through is, navigate through it, and pull items off it. So there you have it, guys, a quick overview of JSON T. There really isn't all that much to learn. It's just about knowing how to look at the JSON context within various parts of the template and using those directives and value substitutions to bring that data into your template code. The majority of the complexity with Squarespace templates, I believe, is understanding the various parts of the template and knowing how to put them together. For that, what I've done is created a new class on Skillshare.com, which covers the whole template development process, including template structure, JSON T, and publishing changes to a live Squarespace website. If you'd like to access the class, Skillshare are currently offering a 2-month free trial for new users, so check out that first link in the description and sign up today if you're interested. Alright, that's all for today. Thanks so much for watching. Be sure to leave your comments below and I'll see you guys on the next video.